This is Saturday devotion being made on Friday because we've got a very busy schedule tomorrow. Going back down to Simpsonville and teaching at Temple, and have a number of activities to take care of tomorrow down in Simpsonville. So we're coming up on Mark chapter 14, beginning at verse 43. Most preachers have messages that they've preached a number of times because they really like them, and if the audience is different, they can take the same message and preach it at a different place. And we usually use the ones that we think have gone over the best or that we like the best. We call them candy sticks, something that's really pleasing, something that's sweet, something that's good. It may be very convicting, and it may not be a pie in the sky kind of a message, but it's one that we've enjoyed preaching and that we think has a great message to it. This section of scripture is one of those candy sticks that I like to preach because I think it has a great message. I think I relate to it very well. And we're in the garden. Jesus has been praying. He's told the disciples the spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. And now comes, with the words barely being spoken, now comes Judas and the whole horde of people. In one of the Gospels, it says a multitude. In another one, it says a great multitude. These are some Roman soldiers. These are some soldiers from the priest and the scribes organization. And they have clubs and they have swords, and they've come with torches, and they've come at night, and they've come to take Jesus. And Judas is going to betray Jesus with a kiss. Certainly there's a lot of messages that have been preached about that, about being betrayed by a kiss, and the betrayal that Judas is making. And yet what I saw in this particular section of scripture that I really liked, because I could relate to it so well, is that you have to read all four accounts of this particular story, actually 3 accounts plus Mark. You need to read Matthew 26, verse 47 and following, Luke 22, and John 18, because they all add very important information. It's really interesting because John adds some names to this particular story, and I'm going to throw those names in and hopefully make this passage fairly clear to you. It seems that as they come to take Jesus, Jesus questions them. Well, why are you coming in the dark? Why are you coming secretly? And why are you coming with clubs and swords? When I've been in the temple, I'm a peaceful man. I could have been taken in the daylight. I could have been taken without force. Why do you come with clubs and swords? And when they find out that it's Jesus, it says they kind of fall back, almost speechless, because they know that Jesus is something special. But during this taking of Jesus in the garden, there's an interesting thing that occurs. In Mark, it says one of the disciples swings the sword towards one of the slaves of the high priest. Another one of the gospel tells us that that disciple said, "Lord, shall we fight?" And then finally we have revealed to us that the one that's swinging the sword is Peter. And he's asked Jesus, "Shall we fight?" And we find out that the one whose ear is cut off is Malchus, and it's his right ear. And so we find the details as we read all of these accounts. But what I saw in this particular passage of scripture is that Peter asked the Lord, "Shall we fight?" But he never waits for an answer. He goes ahead and swings the sword. And obviously Malchus is pretty fast, and he tilts his head in order to avoid the sword, but not totally losing his head. He just loses an ear because he's tilted his head, and his right ear comes off. Jesus said, "No more. Those that live by the sword will die by the sword." Too bad some of these terrorists don't realize that. They don't seem to care. Nevertheless, Peter asked the question, didn't wait for an answer, swung the sword, cut off Malchus's right ear, and Jesus rebukes them for fighting and for swinging the sword. It's just like Peter always rushing ahead of God. But what's interesting is Jesus then reaches over and touches Malchus's ear and heals it completely. And one time when I first read this account and read all of the different Gospels of this particular account, I realized how often I do that. I ask God something, but I don't wait for an answer. I charge ahead, impetuous like Peter, and then Jesus has to clean up the mess that I made. That's the picture that I saw. When Peter swung the sword, having asked the question but not waiting for an answer, because if he had, Jesus would have said no. And then Jesus has to clean up the mess we make. Wonder how many times you rush ahead of God. You ask him the question, you don't get an answer. You swing the sword, you make a mess, and then Jesus has to clean it up. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.